Jack, Sasha, it's great to be with you and to have a little chat about this Malcolm Arnold double concerto for 2 violins and string orchestra. Now, I must confess that although I've been a fan of Malcolm Arnold for quite a while, I didn't know about this piece. And Jack, it's thanks to you that you brought it to my attention and that we ended up bringing this piece to life. So tell me a little bit about how you first came across it and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, a little while ago I was just sort of scouting out double violin concertos for some reason, and found that there were several that I'd never heard of. There's this Malcolm Arnold, there's a lovely Holst one, and I can't remember off the top of my head, there was one other. And through our collaborations over the years, doing the Vaughan Williams concerto a couple of years ago, I thought that this might be up your alley in terms of programming for a concert or something. So I just texted you off, straight away and said, do you know this piece? And there was a recording that had a slot waiting for some Malcolm Arnold repertoire to be put into it.
It fit in absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
And so explain the connection, because Sasha, we hadn't worked together before, but Jack very kindly brought you into the fold.
Yeah, well, for me it was actually very exciting to both record this with Jack and yourself and a wonderful orchestra, but also to play this piece, because actually for me this was a piece that I discovered when I was 14 years old, because it was a piece that at the Yehudi Menuhin school where I studied was often performed. It was something that was actually, I remember at least a couple or even 3 years in a row of different duos of violinists doing it, and I actually thought that it was, especially in the UK, I thought it was standard repertoire and sort of together with Britain's Simple Symphony and pieces like that. And then on top of that, it was really fun because Jack and me, we've known each other for many years. And we've worked together a few times here and there. Jack has a wonderful festival in Oxford, and then so I've played there, and then my wife Wu Chen has a festival in Surrey where we played together last year as well. And but we never had collaborated together on a concerto disc. And it was something that I thought would be really, really fun to do. So when Jack called me up about it, I was really, really happy to do that.
Great. And so you thought that the piece was in the mainstream repertoire in the UK. And Jack, is it in the mainstream UK repertoire?
Well, I didn't know it existed, so it was in the mainstream Menuhin school repertoire in the UK. But I mean, it may have been for a while. Often the pieces, they get written, they have a bit of a flurry of performances and then kind of fall by the wayside. I don't know, if you ask the average professional violinist, tell me a double violin concerto, they're just going to say Bach and, so it's strange. It's strange as well because it's incredibly listenable piece. It's fun, it's beautiful, and there's nothing at all difficult to approach in it.
So as far as the writing is for the 2 solo parts, is it, it's obviously a very difficult piece, but it's not so unapproachable as to make it sort of impossible for people to get near, is it?
No, I don't think. I think it's one of those pieces that's both enjoyable to listen to and to play. I think it shows the power and the beauty of the violin for both voices, which is not always the case, and also I think it's really interesting how he writes it because, for example, in the first movement there is a lot of sort of cooperation between the 2 instruments, a lot of imitation. While in the third movement, it gets a little bit more confrontational, perhaps.
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, I think he uses the orchestra in different ways to sort of highlight that, because I always felt that in the first movement, it's sort of you 2 versus the orchestra a little bit. And then in the last movement, the orchestra is this kind of relentless engine underneath, on top of which it feels like the 2 violin parts battle a little bit. It's a bit more sort of angsty in that respect in the final movement.
In the final movement, it feels like a bit of a game of tennis, where we're sort of batting a line between us and trying to outdo each other. It's really got kind of a joyful interplay between the violins.
And does it change the way you play it? Because obviously there's a lot of stuff where you're playing together, and so that there has to be some sort of collaborative approach to the sound you're making, does there? And does that vary then when there are movements where, as you say, you're backing it back and forth between you? Does it change the way you play it?
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the movements when we're playing together, we are sort of trying to blend maybe our sounds more, and if one of us does something, the other adjusts to it and imitates it. If you have it, but with the movement where it's a game of tennis, we're trying. It feels like we're trying to outdo each other because we've got a lot of sort of scales that fly up, and then one of us will hit the higher note in the scale afterwards and stuff. So you got to hit that one a bit harder.
Okay.
And so it's like really like cross court. And backhand cross court and things like that.
Does he write in a particularly idiomatic way? Is that do you look at the string writing and say, that's very much a Malcolm Arnold style, or is it actually, is it not so distinct?
I have to say I'm not an expert in all of Malcolm Arnold's other works, so I don't know so much how it compares to some of his other pieces, but I think what I do find is that it has quite sort of very individual and personal language as a piece of music, as a like harmonic and melodic. So I think it's very interesting. It's this kind of combination of a lot of tonal romanticism, but also with some interesting harmonies that are, I guess, a little bit more progressive, a little bit more modern in the modern direction.
Yeah. And I find, particularly with this concerto and with some of the other pieces that we record on the album as well, that you can hear a bit of his film score influence in the second movement as well. It's not very long, but there's something so kind of calm and still and almost a bit kind of desolate about it that it creates a very striking atmosphere in a very short space of time. And I think you get that impression of the film score.
Yeah. It could have a story to it.
Yes.
This music, and it's very evocative of human emotions or sort of a storytelling sort of narrative. You could picture scenes very easily with the music. It's really, it's very approachable for a listener. It's
for me, the second movement really is actually the most sort of personal, intimate. Very, very expressive. There is like it's like the heartbeat of the whole piece, I think.
Are there any standout moments for either of you, either specific bits or movements as a whole, where you feel that it really gave the piece a bit of an identity for you?
Oh, for me, it would be the second movement.
Okay.
For me, I just find that melody is it's so beautifully written, and he constructs the whole movement also very beautifully with this, very, like you were saying, this haunting, also a little haunting middle section, which is a bit like a funeral procession, almost at some point. No, it's very good. I was actually thinking about when we're talking about imitation, and how in the first movement we try to blend in as much as we can. I remember listening to the first edit. There were times when I couldn't tell which one of us were playing, and I thought that was really cool. Actually.
So have you played together a lot over the years? Obviously you're both soloists, but have there been opportunities to play at the same time together?
In chamber music festivals, we've done a fair amount.
Right.
I think probably not before maybe 10 years ago.
Yes, that's true.
And then, that's a wonderful thing about this business, the world of music, is that you do travel through your life with paths intertwined, and we're going to be in Australia next year together, and we'll hopefully do something in the States at some point, etc. So, and that's a great thing. We started off competing, because when you're a young musician and you're doing the solo-y thing, you're trying your best to get your little claws into a certain part of the business, and then so we first met competing against each other in Young Musician of the Year back in 1999
or 2000, I think.
2000,
I think maybe it was 2000.
And we often joke that the reason we get on is because we were both beaten by Guy Johnson. So neither of us won. If he'd have won, then I would have hated his guts. And so you start off kind of looking at each other like. And then after a while, we find your place and you keep going after 25 years. We're still at it and meeting up, and it's a great thing. We can discuss different experiences and get advice from each other. sometimes share fingerings.
Absolutely.
If we, you know, if I send him a message, have you got this?
The great thing is that neither of us look like we've been at it for 20 years. So that's a good thing.
But silly question, but therefore, can you second guess each other a little bit with this sort of piece that's very high octane energy? Do you sort of think you know what the other's about to do?
I think because even if we haven't played this piece together before, but we do talk about music quite a lot.
Yeah,
and also because we both teach a lot.
Yeah.
We also talk about our approaches sometimes with students and with repertoire. And I think 95%, well, I would say basically 100% of the time we agree, I think, on almost every conclusion that we talk about.
That's that's not necessarily a usual thing. I think we just have a similar outlook on expression and how to deal with certain material. I think there's certainly been times when I've played with other musicians where I don't really get what they're doing and they don't get what I'm doing and it doesn't work. But we, you know, that's the thing with the recording, when you listen back and neither of us sometimes can tell who's playing. I have to get my score out and go, oh, that was him. Okay. Because that's a very interesting thing, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can hear the sort of synergy between the two of you, as you say, when you play. I mean, there's really obviously one agreed approach to it from the two of you, and yet you have the appropriate moments of battle and the appropriate moments when you're together. And I feel that, you know, there's a really committed outing of this amazing piece, and hopefully it'll bring it to everyone's attention a bit more.
We hope so.
My humble view is simply that it's a bit short, and so perhaps that's why it's not been programmed that much. You know, it's about 15, 16 minutes long, but perhaps the way to look at it is actually that it's a really useful piece for programming. I mean, it's not a 40-minute concerto for a gigantic symphony orchestra that's going to be very expensive and very time-consuming to put together and rehearse. That actually there's something quite compact and you know, you get a lot of bang for your buck.
It's a really great chamber work, actually. So I think well, I mean, all music, in my opinion, is all music is chamber music, but in this case, you can really see it as being part of so many different programs. It can be a part of maybe one concerto of it. For example, if it's like a 2-violin showcase or something like that, and it's one of the many pieces on the program, it could also be partnered up with another shortish concerto for 2 violins, like Bach, for example. But also, it might be appropriate for a chamber music festival, where you might want to just get some friends around and form a little kind of mini string ensemble and put it in there as well.
Because even though the orchestra part is, you know, quite rich, there's quite a lot going on, it could be done with fairly small orchestral forces as well. And it's just strings, you know, which helps keep things pretty limited. And he creates an enormous amount of textures and variety with relatively
as long as there's a good conductor.
Absolutely.
Well.
I was just wondering.
it will work. Yeah.
Well, going back to chapter 1, is it time to do the Holst at some point in 2025 or 2026?
You told me about it.
It's beautiful. It's also really nice.
I haven't listened to it yet, so that's for the next one then, is it?
Okay. When you do the planets.
Yeah.
We can add it on.
Right, we're on. Great. Sasha, Jack, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.